Okay, so my question is a little bit going a little bit political, but not in the modern political sense. Not talking heads, not bumper stickers. Actually, philosophical stuff. So it's going to be heavy, a little bit to listen to today. I think for our listeners, but I really think it's important. I think it's a topic that a lot of us wonder about.
All right.
In light of the conversations going on, especially since 2020 and even since 2016 and the whole Trump phenomenon and politics and COVID and everything's been blown up. So we're thinking about all this stuff. Like, what's going on? What is our society? Do we have a democracy? Like, is it actually tyrannical? What happened? So we're going to go back even further, which is the Catholic Church itself incompatible with the modern state? Is that... So we need to know two things, kind of what the modern state is. I'm going to ask you to give a good definition of that, not go off too much.
Okay.
And then, is the Catholic Church incompatible with that? So maybe you just want to actually go for it however you want.
Yeah.
There's the question.
So yeah, I would start out by saying that Belloc, maybe I'll start with Belloc's essay. So Belloc wrote an essay back in the 1920s, probably. It was published in 1931.
So it was in the 20s, but it was published in 1931.
Well, because he wrote it before, and then became part of a book of essays.
I was trying to get you.
Sorry, yeah. So it's part of a book of essays called Essays of a Catholic.
Okay.
And he had an essay called, the title was "The Catholic Church is Incompatible with the Modern State."
Okay. Oh, interesting.
And I was really interested when I found that, because I'm a distributist, so I like Chesterton and Belloc, right? I'm also a fellow at New Polity, and I love the radical critique that New Polity's offering of our liberal order, right? And it's doing what we call post-liberal thinking. And so I saw that essay and I was like, wow, is Belloc a post-liberal? And so I read that essay and I realized he is. And then I was like, oh wow, there's this post-liberal element within distributism. So distributism offers this radical critique. And so, well, what is that? What's interesting about that is Belloc said, hey, I read this essay, this American essay, and it puts forward the familiar thesis that the Catholic Church is incompatible with the modern state. And I'm like, what, 100 years ago it was a familiar idea that the Catholic Church is incompatible with the modern state?
Yeah.
I was totally flabbergasted, right? Because I think most Catholics wouldn't have been thinking. I can't think of any Catholic, right, that's a familiar thesis, right? That is an unfamiliar. That's why New Polity is so important, because it's saying this, what used to be a familiar idea, right, should now be more familiar. So I read that, I was like, that's crazy. And so the American essay, says Belloc, was claiming that, because Catholics know this incompatibility, Catholics are dangerous. Catholics are like domestic terrorists. Catholics are insurrectionists. Be aware of them. Be wary of them, because they're going to plant bombs on the state and blow it up.
Not to go modern, but we've come full circle.
Yeah.
Because, watching out these traditional Catholic parishes, and they've got to have the FBI and people watching them because they're dangerous.
The rosary's connected to guns and violence and domestic terrorism. And so that, you're right, that's kind of surfacing up a little bit. And what Belloc says is, the essayist in America, which I haven't identified where that one is yet, but he refers to it, is they're right that the Catholic Church is incompatible with the modern state, that they're wrong that Catholics are therefore insurrectionists and domestic terrorists. And the reason why, he says, is because Catholics believe in justice, right? And this person doesn't know anything about what Catholics actually believe elsewise, And so he says, okay, we're not automatically domestic terrorists, we're not automatically but at some point there has to be a conflict. A conflict has to necessarily arise at some level or in some places between the modern church and the Catholic state, modern state and the Catholic Church.
So when he says conflict, obviously he's not thinking necessarily a violent eruption.
It could be, think of protests, right?
He's just thinking these two ideas are different in such a way that they're going to rub against each other.
Not only that, but like with action, not domestic terrorist action, but think of, rescue operations, pro-life rescue operations, right? And people being arrested. Like one of my great inspirations, Elizabeth Anscombe, was arrested many times for protesting abortion clinics, right? And trying to literally take the women out of them, right? And help them escape. Right? And that becomes illegal and they go to jail for that. So that's a kind of an act of civil disobedience, you could call it. Right.
So it's not like bombing that would be people. The domestic terrorist on one side. Yeah. People would think that thought because they're disrupting the social order.
Yes. And so the whole point about this is that the Catholic Church, at some point, there's an incompatibility. Why? Because the Catholic Church claims an ultimate authority in morals and faith. And of course, man is fundamentally religious and ethical. And so that authority is higher than the authority of any state. But a Catholic thinks that authority is contained in this literally institution on earth, right, through the magisterium and the teaching of the Catholic Church. And so that kind of authority, which used to be, you might say, integrated into the society in the Middle Ages, let's say. That's a key time to see this Christendom.
People lived and breathed and assumed that it was the authority.
And it was an authority.
That it was the authority.
Yes, I mean, you can see it in action. It's not just that they thought it was an authority.
Yeah, it wasn't abstractly an authority. It was concretely.
It was concretely. So think about, Theodosius, right, who does public penance, right, because he was locked out of the church, right, by Ambrose. So it's like, well, that's a kind of obvious moment where this great political leader is submitting to the authority of the church, and it's an actual event concretely with two laws, you might say, right, the higher law and the lower law, right, and there's a relationship. We might later call that the two swords, or even rougher, misleading way, the church and the state. Yeah. Right.
That's a lot to unpack.
Yes.
Those ideas, church and state. So summarize so far what you're saying.
Yeah. So the Catholic Church is incompatible with the modern state. We haven't defined anything or why, but it's at least the clue is there's an authority that the Catholic Church has that represents the highest authority in life, which is morals and religion. Right. And then the state, right, somehow is incompatible with that. Why? We haven't got to that yet.
Yeah, that's the next question. So I get the authority thing. That makes sense. But why is the modern state? Because it seems to me that, to play devil's advocate, is that if the Catholic Church, if everybody just did evangelized, right, every individual, right, and we're making people Catholic or even just Christian, even just good evangelicals making people Christian, people converting their lives, then our society would be so much better and so much just that. What does the state, and the state's not stopping us from doing that. So why is it opposed? Why are they incompatible?
That's right. So it has to do with the structure of the modern state, the regime form, you might say, the way in which ruling is set up. Right. And so that what happened is the change into the modern period, right? From the Reformation forward, things start to change in a radical way. And you have the Peace of Westphalia as like a key moment, right? Where there's a certain view of the way that the state should be. That when I say state, I mean the government. 1648. Like newsflash, 1648. And so that's where what happens is the concept, which we now call modern sovereignty, right? That's when that sort of concept becomes officially accepted and expanded, right? And this is the beginning of what we'd call the modern state.
And what was the concept?
So the concept is that it came from the previous Peace of Augsburg, right? And it was
1555.
1555, which said that he whose region his the religion.